Welcome to Kitchen Wisdom. Come on into my kitchen studio, pull up a chair, make yourself at home, and don't mind the crumbs on the counter. Today, we're diving into something that has become one of my favorite ways to entertain: charcuterie boards. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, everyone gets excited when they see a board piled high with snacks. They're eye-catching, fun, and let's be honest, there's something about having a variety of little bites that makes you feel spoiled. I've made charcuterie boards for holidays, birthdays, even just cozy nights at home, and they always bring a smile. Over the years, I've had my fair share of wins and a few funny fails, and now I've found a rhythm that really works for me. If you want to see the recipes I use for these boards, along with more ideas and inspiration, be sure to visit my blog and YouTube channel at Arina Photography. Before you even unwrap the cheese, planning makes all the difference. I used to think you just grabbed whatever looked good at the store and threw it on a tray. Trust me, that method usually ends up looking like a sad snack pile that nobody really wants to touch. Now I ask myself some very specific questions. Am I making a savory board, a sweet board, or a mix of both? What's the occasion? Do I need something casual and fun, or am I aiming for elegant and impressive? And most importantly, how many people am I feeding? Because nothing kills the vibe like running out of cheese halfway through the night. I also think about cost. Charcuterie boards can get pricey fast depending on how fancy you go. A board loaded with imported cheeses and specialty cured meats is stunning, but it's also a splurge. On the other hand, you can create a beautiful spread with budget-friendly cheeses, store-brand crackers, and seasonal fruit, and no one will complain. When I'm on a tighter budget, I sometimes skip the full charcuterie board and make a butter board instead. You can put together a beautiful butter board for under $40, compared to a charcuterie board that can easily run $100 or more. So I try to match my choices to both my budget and the crowd. Who am I entertaining? That question shapes the board just as much as the ingredients. If I'm hosting close friends who love simple snacks, I keep it fun and laid back. Think cheddar cubes, grapes, and pretzels. If it's a holiday party where I want to impress, I'll lean into more elaborate cheeses, fancy crackers, and maybe even add some edible flowers for flair. In a way, a charcuterie board is like the dress code of the party. It sets the tone before anyone even takes a bite. Show up in sweatpants, that's your casual cheese and cracker board. Show up in a sequined dress, that's the lavish board piled with prosciutto roses and French brie. I also think about the kind of board or tray I'll use. A big rustic wooden board gives a cozy homemade feel, while a tiered stand instantly adds height and drama. One year for Christmas, I used a giant cutting board, and people thought I had hired a caterer, when in reality it was just me piling things artfully at the last minute. That's the magic of good planning. The board is your stage, and the food is the performance. I've tried it all, from plain cutting boards to trays with edges, to keep things corralled. For bigger gatherings, I love tiered stands, because they create dimension and let you fit way more snacks in a smaller space. But here's a little extra tip. If you're planning to take your board to a party, I definitely recommend using a large tray with edges instead of an open board. It keeps food from spilling out during the trip. And if it's an office potluck, I'd even recommend going with a charcuterie box instead of a board. A 12 cupcake paper box works perfectly. Lay parchment paper inside and start assembling your spread right in the box. I've made a few of these for my husband's office parties, and they were a hit. They're neat, portable, and no one has to worry about juggling a huge wooden board through a lobby or break room. And if you're hosting a big group at home, or even at the office, skip the board altogether. Lay parchment paper down right on the kitchen counter or table, secure it with tape, and start building your spread there. It looks abundant, saves dishes, and makes cleanup a breeze. For really large parties, an even better option is charcuterie cups, individual little servings, so food doesn't get touched by everyone, and each person has their own cup to enjoy. One more sanity-saving tip. If you're headed to a party as a guest, use plastic disposable trays. That way, you don't have to wait around until the very last guest leaves just to grab your tray back. You can simply leave it behind and enjoy the night stress-free. Accessories are the unsung heroes. Early on, I skipped little bowls, and it was chaos. Olives rolling into the crackers, nuts scattering everywhere. Lesson learned. Now I keep a stash of small bowls, ramekins, and dipping cups just for snack boards. I also like adding fun touches like toothpicks, mini skewers, ribbons, or even holiday-themed napkins. They make the board feel polished without much extra effort. And if you're taking your board to a party, I strongly recommend using disposable utensils and small pinch bowls. They make serving so much easier, keep things clean, and you don't have to worry about chasing down your favorite little ramekin at the end of the night. And here's a personal tip. If you're on a budget, don't stress. Some of my favorite boards were made using trays I found on clearance at Hobby Lobby in September. Add a bow, maybe a sprig of rosemary or thyme, and suddenly your board looks high-end. The ingredients. This is where things get exciting and a little overwhelming if you don't have a plan. When I first started, I'd pile whatever I had into one corner of the board and wonder why it didn't look appealing. Over time, I learned that balance is everything. For savory boards, I like to mix soft cheeses with hard ones, mild flavors with sharp ones. A creamy brie right next to a wedge of aged cheddar creates contrast and makes people curious to try both. Add thinly sliced meats like prosciutto, salami, or even turkey breast for a variety. And always include at least 2 cracker varieties, so there's choice. Something crunchy is essential: almonds, pistachios, or even popcorn. Give texture and keep bites interesting. Fresh vegetables are non-negotiable. Cherry tomatoes, carrot sticks, and broccoli florets not only add color, they also lighten things up, so it doesn't feel like a heavy all-cheese situation. Juicy fruits like grapes, berries, or apple slices bring sweetness and brighten the board. I've also started adding dried fruits like apricots or cranberries, which last longer and give a chewy texture that pairs beautifully with cheese. Another tip, think about spreads. A little dish of hummus, mustard, or fig jam can elevate even the simplest cheese and cracker bite into something people rave about. It's the small details like these that transform a board from average to irresistible. For sweet boards, I lean into indulgence, because honestly, this is where I get to play. Cookies, chocolate-covered pretzels, graham crackers, marshmallows, and candies all make appearances, and I try to bring in as many textures as possible. Crunchy cookies next to soft marshmallows, smooth chocolate against salty pretzels. It's all about contrast. I also throw in fruit for freshness. Strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries not only cut the sweetness, but also add bright pops of color. One summer, I made a full-on s'mores board for a bonfire. Graham crackers, marshmallows, chocolates, plus some extras like peanut butter cups and even caramel squares. People still remind me about it years later. It taught me that the right mix of sweet and fun can turn a simple spread into a memory. Since then, I've experimented with seasonal twists. A Halloween candy board loaded with candy corn and pumpkin cookies, or a Christmas dessert board with gingerbread men, peppermint bark, and sugar cookies. Each board feels unique, but the principle is the same. Mix indulgence with freshness and variety, and let the colors and textures do half the work for you. And if you're curious about Butter boards. Here's what I like to include. I spread softened butter across a serving board, almost like you're frosting a cake, but with butter instead of icing. Then comes the fun part, layering on flavorful add-ins. Sometimes I go savory with roasted garlic, fresh herbs, a sprinkle of flaky sea salt, maybe even a drizzle of olive oil to make it glisten. Other times I swing the other way and create a sweet version, topping the butter with honey, cinnamon sugar, dried fruit, or even a touch of citrus zest for brightness. The beauty of butter boards is how customizable and affordable they are. You can put one together for under $40, which makes it such a great option if you're entertaining on a budget compared to a charcuterie board that can easily run $100 or more. Add some warm baguette slices, fresh sourdough, or a pile of crackers on the side, and people will dig in like it's the main event. What I love most is how interactive it feels. Guests scoop, spread, and build their own bites. It turns the appetizer into a shared experience. I've even seen kids get excited about trying bread with butter when it's laid out like this. And that's saying something. A butter board is a budget-friendly centerpiece that feels just as indulgent as a full charcuterie spread. But it's easier, more playful, and always a conversation starter. And here's the key: color and texture. Don't clump all your beige foods together. Spread them around and balance them with pops of red berries or bright green veggies. A charcuterie board is as much about the look as the taste. Assembling the board. This step used to intimidate me, but now I actually love it. Here's my personal routine. These days, I start by laying down parchment paper first. It not only makes cleanup easier, but it also protects the food from the board itself. Some boards aren't actually finished or sealed for serving food. They're meant more for looks than for eating. So to be on the safe side, I always put parchment down before arranging anything. It also helps with sliding and gives you a clean surface to work with. Once that's set, I always start with the bowls. They take up the most space and anchor the layout, so I place them first where I want dips, olives, nuts, or jams to go. Then I move on to the bigger items like cheese, blocks, or clusters of grapes. These pieces are like the main furniture on your board. They shape the flow and fill in the largest gaps. After that, I weave in the medium-sized foods like meats and crackers. I try to curve or fan them out so they look intentional and not just dropped on the board. Finally, I fill the remaining spaces with the smallest items, nuts, candies, or berries, that act almost like the accessories in an outfit. They tie everything together and make the board feel abundant rather than sparse. One tip that completely changed my cleanup game: parchment paper. Lining the board makes everything easier to clean and keeps oils and colors from staining your board. And when in doubt, pile it on. A charcuterie board should look abundant and inviting. Sparse boards feel sad, but a little extra abundance makes guests feel spoiled. Over the years, I've picked up a few tricks. One of my favorites is using disposable gloves when I'm chopping veggies or arranging foods. It keeps everything clean and saves my hands from smelling like onions or garlic for the rest of the day. Plus, it makes me feel a little more professional, like I'm running my own mini catering kitchen. Another trick I love is grouping foods by color. It instantly makes the board look intentional and almost like a piece of artwork. A row of bright red strawberries next to pale cheese and green grapes looks so much more appealing than scattering them randomly. When I'm prepping ahead, I always store everything separately in airtight containers and then assemble the board right before guests arrive. That way, the crackers stay crisp, the fruits don't get soggy, and everything tastes fresh instead of tired. Here's a lesson I learned the hard way. Always check for food allergies. I once almost brought a nut-heavy board to a party without asking, and luckily someone mentioned it before I set it down. Now I always ask guests about allergies ahead of time. It saves embarrassment and avoids potential emergencies. And here's one more sanity saver. I keep extra parchment paper, plastic wrap, and resealable bags nearby. Leftovers can be quickly packed up, which means no one has to wrestle with half-eaten cheese blocks at the end of the night. Guests appreciate it, and it makes cleanup so much easier for me too. The best part about charcuterie boards is how adaptable they are. Valentine's Day, pile it with pink and red sweets. 4th of July, think red, white, and blue with berries, yogurt-covered pretzels, and candies. Easter, pastel veggies, colorful candies, maybe even a chocolate bunny or two. Honestly, it's like dressing up your snacks for the holiday. They get their own little costume. I've made bagel brunch boards stacked with spreads, s'mores boards for summer nights, and fruit and veggie boards for playdates. Each one feels different but special. I've even done over-the-top Christmas dessert boards loaded with gingerbread, peppermint bark, and sugar cookies, and casual, clean out the fridge boards that still looked fancy because of how they were arranged. The secret is tailoring it to the people you're sharing it with and the vibe of the party. A board for kids' playdates looks very different from one I'd put together for a holiday cocktail night. And here's the fun part. Half the joy is watching everyone's eyes light up when they see it. Sometimes the reaction is better than the eating itself. If you're curious to try different styles, I've got lots of these boards on my blog and YouTube channel at Arina Photography. Holiday boards, brunch boards, dessert boards, you name it. You can follow along, steal some of my ideas, and avoid some of my funny fails too. So that's my process for making charcuterie boards. Equal parts food, art, and fun. A little planning goes a long way. The right mix of foods keeps it interesting, and personal touches make it memorable. And don't forget, it doesn't have to be perfect. I've had grapes roll off the board and crackers collapse like dominoes. And you know what? People laughed, grabbed a grape, and kept on snacking. Half the charm of these boards is that they feel generous and abundant, not stiff or staged. At the end of the day, it's about enjoying the food and the company. If your cheese wedges look like they survived a toddler attack, that's okay. It just means people are actually eating and having fun. And if all else fails, just add more cheese. Because really, when has anyone ever complained about too much cheese? Until next time, happy snacking, happy styling, and may your grapes stay put and your crackers stand tall.